Welcome to Crowdmark Sessions, where we bring educators together to explore innovative teaching practices and redefine learning in today's world. Join us as we dive into discussions that inspire and transform the way we think about education. My name is Michelle Cares, and I'm the host of Crowdmark Sessions podcast. I'm also the co-founder and CEO of Crowdmark, the leading grading and assessment system for education. Our mission and values of integrity, collaboration, and community are at the core of everything we do at Crowdmark. In this podcast, we'll be interviewing trailblazers from our community of educators to hear their perspectives on learning, technology, and the changing landscape of education. We've got a phenomenal list of guests that will be appearing on the podcast, and we look forward to sharing their ideas with you. Welcome to Crowdmark Sessions, the podcast where we explore how technology, teaching, and innovation come together to shape the future of education. In this episode, we're discussing a critical but often overlooked area of academic life, how we prepare teaching assistants to grade consistently, fairly, and with impact. As classrooms grow more complex and assessment evolves, supporting TAs isn't just a logistical concern. It's essential to upholding academic quality and improving student learning. And yet, less than half of graduate teaching assistants reportedly receive formal training before taking on an instructional responsibility. In large multi-section courses, this lack of preparation can lead to major inconsistencies in both student feedback and learning outcomes. Our guest today, Lydia Chen, Assistant Professor of Chemistry and Chemical Biology from McMaster University, is working to change that. She's piloting a TA training camp that uses Crowdmark and real-world grading scenarios to help teaching assistants practice and refine their assessment skills before they ever mark a student's academic work. We'll explore how Lydia's teaching philosophy guides her in today's digital-first classrooms, how tools like Crowdmark support collaborative grading, and why realistic, structured training could be the missing link in scalable, high-quality feedback. Lydia, thank you for joining us. Can you tell us about your background and the courses you teach?
Absolutely. Thank you for this great invitation. I'm happy to be here with all of you today. So in terms of my background training, my PhD is in analytical chemistry. I completed it at University of Alberta. And currently, my role is a teaching stream assistant professor. So what that means is 80% of my time is dedicated towards teaching and another 20% for administration. So out of that 80% of my teaching responsibility, I teach all flavors of first year general chemistry. So we have Chem 1A03, Chem 1AA3, and Chem 1E03 at McMaster University. And on top of that, because of my previous training in analytical chemistry, I also teach our Introduction to Analytical Chemistry, which is a second year quantitative chemical analysis course. And this is a course that is not only required by our program student in chemistry, chemical biology, and also sustainable chemistry, but it's also taken by, let's say, students in upper year chemical engineers, students who are interested to delve further into practical analytical chemistry skills in a laboratory setting, for example, in the health science department. And then on top of that, I also teach a pharmaceutical chemistry course that explore the intersection between chemistry and also biology, and study small molecule interaction, for example, drug candidates with, let's say, proteins or enzymes. So yeah, those are the three major courses that I teach in McMaster University.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I can't say that I know a lot about chemistry. That's something that I haven't done any further education in. Can you give us an idea about the size of your classes, your first year classes, in terms of numbers of students?
Sure. So we team teach at McMaster University general chemistry. So what that means is out of, let's say, 1,800 students that's registered in a first year chemistry course, we divide it up into 4 sections. So, on average, we'll have anywhere between, let's say, 450 students to 600 students in one section, depends on the year. So those are our first year course. Yeah.
Wow, those are large class sizes.
Yes. But that
Um,
it's like a pyramid, right? So we start
right.
big, and then as our student declares specialization in their program, then maybe a second year level in the introduction to analytical chemistry class, I'm looking at about
Hmm.
200 students.
Okay. Hmm. So McMaster is really well known and one might say famous for the health sciences
Yes.
and innovations in medicine. Are a lot of these chemistry students looking to pursue a career in medicine?
Um, I think just like most university programs, the majority of students who go into Faculty of Science does have some medical future that they are thinking of to explore as their career, right? So I
Hmm.
would say for the
Hmm.
most part, yes. But another significant portion is graduate school as well, or other professional
Right.
school. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So, shifting gears a little bit, how would you describe your overall teaching philosophy, especially in today's rapidly changing educational landscape?
That's a great question. I think that question and the response to that question has to update according to the rapid changing of educational landscape as we progresses, right? But I
Hmm.
think at the end of the day, regardless of how technology, let's say, has advanced throughout our time, at the end of the day, it is about providing a supportive and inclusive learning environment for our learners. And what that may be, and what that mechanism may look like, and what that support framework may look like, that is up to essentially each individual instructor's preference, their
Hmm.
prior knowledge, and really to what extent are they open to learn new technology, to learn new teaching practices to incorporate into their curriculum.
Where would people or educators today learn these new technologies or learn these new approaches to teaching?
That's a great question. What I typically like to look at that is not strictly, okay, here's a list. After talking to my colleagues in various post-secondary education, and when I see them at conferences, for example, it's not so
Hmm.
much a list of trainings that I would actively pursue, but one step backwards is to have a conversation with your students to find out what kind of support network, what kind of framework, what kind of structure are they looking for. Because I do find it's very easy for me to fall into the trap of, oh, this is a new feature, there's a new technology, and then just jump right in, right? Without really taking into consideration what is it that the students need, right? Versus what we think
Hmm.
they need. So I think two avenues, right? Going to conferences to learn from our fellow educators about
Hmm.
what they're doing in their own classroom, and also talking to our students from what is it that you
Hmm.
would like me to incorporate, for example, and that will make your learning experience just that much more rewarding, more positive, more supportive.
Okay. Do you think students' expectations have changed over the last 5 years? Do you think that the students today are different than students back, say, in 2019?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think there is a lot of factors that go into why a student's expectation change, right? They are also changing in response to their environment as well, right? It's just part of
Hmm.
adaptation, part of survival, right?
Hmm.
What I notice the most about students' expectation when they come into post-secondary learning is their attitude towards how much information is provided and in what manner the information are provided has changed. I definitely notice there's a shift towards immediate, give it to me now type of attitude.
Okay,
Yeah,
so everyone's expecting immediate responses and real time feedback from
absolutely.
instructors.
Absolutely.
I was just going to say this is a great segue into my next question, which was what are some of the biggest challenges educators face right now in terms of student engagement and learning?
That's perfect because I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I was just going to say that's exactly why we love Crowdmark because you
Okay.
address their particular needs, right, for our students, and that allow educators to facilitate that immediate targeted response in a timely manner to students. Because I think because of that shift in student expectation, they would like to receive response like that as soon as they're done
Hmm.
submitting a report, as soon as they're done submitting a test, as an example, right? But how do
Hmm.
we coordinate that when we have such a high demand in terms of student enrollment? And on top of that, how do you provide feedback that is targeted and that allows students to be able to take that as a learning opportunity as well, which they can then apply to their future assignment, then apply to their future test and exam setting. So we really like. So when I say we, I'm representing myself, and I teach second year pharmaceutical chemistry and analytical chemistry. So there's a lot of our student population that are taking those courses. So I lead a team of 7 to 8 TAs, and their main
Okay.
responsibility is to support me in the laboratory setting, and that would associate with grading pre-lab, grading post-lab reports, and some of the TAs are also grading tests and exam as well with me. So when you combine all these factors, you need to have a platform that would provide enough features in there so that my TA can do their job in a timely manner and in a very specific manner to support students' learning process nowadays.
Okay. I'm curious, what kinds of things are students expected to accomplish in labs?
Mhm.
And it seems like a very chemistry specific requirement. And what's the percentage of time spent in labs versus time spent in the classroom listening to lectures or
Okay,
what we might consider teaching time?
that's a great question. In terms of commitment, just for the execution of lecture time and laboratory time, they're equal. So on a weekly basis, we have 3 hours of lecture. So we have
Hmm.
1 hour lecture time 3 times throughout a week. And then for a laboratory, it's also weekly 3 hours lab as well for second year in analytical chemistry. And that number changed to 4 hours if we're looking at pharmaceutical chemistry lab. Um, but that's just the execution time, right? But a
Hmm.
lot has to go into it. For example, before I show up in my 3 hours lab, there is pre-lab preparation that I will need to do, and that include reading the laboratory procedure, write out what are the procedure that I will need to execute during that 3 hours lab, maybe prepare a
Hmm.
table to record my raw data, maybe include a sample calculation of what I'm going to do with this set of data once I have it, so I can determine, for example, that unknown concentration in this mystery solution. Yeah.
Hmm. Okay. That is a lot of prep work in
Yes.
addition to the course material. Okay. How has the rise of digital tools, and not just Crowdmark, but any other tools that you might use, how has the rise of these digital tools influenced the way you teach and assess students?
Mm, that's another excellent question. Um, so I think this is like a cause and effect type of situation. We notice a student's behavior has changed over the years, and then our service provider, right, from
Hmm.
education technology industry, come up and meet those niche area. They fill up those gaps that we saw previously. So some of the common things that I've noticed is that it becomes increasingly harder for me to read students' emotion, read students' facial expression when I teach. And that's, of course, you're assuming students are attending in person. So, what that means is typically I will be able to, for example, read their micro expression to see, okay, maybe a frown to say, I don't quite understand this.
Hmm.
You probably want to re explain this again, right? I
Hmm.
find that piece is increasingly more difficult for me to gauge, and that's okay. because a rise of education technology tools will fill that needs, right? Or maybe there is feature where students input their emotion using emoji, and I get to see that in real time. Or if I notice,
Okay. Yeah.
okay, there's a high concentration of student giving me a this face, right? Okay, then let's review that, right? Instead of carrying on, maybe doing problem solving before I was able to address even that conceptual need of re-explanation. And that's just in the lecture environment, right? But let's say if we
Hmm.
switch gear towards the assessment piece, right? Let it be they submitted their lab reports, they submit their tests or exam responses. When we mentioned it earlier, there is this immediate feel they want to get feedback right away, right? But how do we do
Hmm.
it in a consistent manner? So student A and student B that put similar enough response will get the same mark and also similar targeted feedback. That becomes a very critical piece because as we learned from our previous experience, students talk to one another, even though they may be in a different laboratory group, right? But they talk to one another, right? As they should, as part of the learning
Hmm.
community. So it's very important that we have a way of providing a learning opportunity for our teaching assistant who grade right beside us, right, for those assessment piece to ensure they have that opportunity to excel, just like the same opportunity, learning opportunity that our students have.
Right. So speaking of digital, the other day I was trying to ride my bicycle, and it was near an event space. So there were a lot of pedestrians, a lot of people who were walking towards the concert venue, and I was going, kind of counter to the crowd on my bicycle, and it was really challenging because as all these people were walking toward their destination, they were all staring at their phones. So I noticed that no one was looking up, and if they weren't looking up, they weren't going to see me on my bicycle. And there, it was like I didn't want to hit anyone, but at the same time, I had to navigate, thread my way through all these people, and I found it like one of those moments. It struck me where here are all these people who are headed towards a very human experience of listening to music together in a crowd, but they weren't present. They weren't present even on their way to the conference with staring at their phone for whatever reason. I'm wondering, what is that a challenge for you with students? Do you find that you're having to fight the tide of mobile devices and the fight for attention for students even when you're in an in-person environment?
Oh, I think that's an absolute yes. So, for example, in my master university Department of Chemistry and Chemical Biology, on a routine basis, I will receive peer-to-peer teaching observation from my fellow educators so that we could help each other in a supportive environment on how to improve our teaching strategy, our teaching practices. Because
Hmm.
I typically don't have the luxury of going behind students and see what they see on their screen, right? I typically walk in front of them and circulate, right?
Right.
They reported back to me that just so you know, more and more and more students, and that this is a direct correlation about their relative position to the front of the podium. The further the students are sitting away from the podium, the more likely their screen is on something else other than your lecture. So absolutely, well, we see that, uh, and I like how you mentioned like for your in-person component because that's already like for me, I already greatly appreciate it that you even get off your bed, like march over from your residential area, from your on-campus housing as an example, to attend a lecture in person. Because on
Hmm.
top of that, we also offer live streaming lectures and record it at the
Right.
same time because we want to lower that barrier of that physical distance. Because
Hmm.
McMaster University is a commuter campus. A lot of our students, including myself, will probably have to spend an average maybe 30 to an hour on commuting in order to be present physically on campus. So we offer that. to lower that physical barriers for students. But on average, I would say I'm looking at a class attendance of maybe 25%. Yeah.
Okay. So one quarter. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you think that students have the ability to get as much out of a recorded lecture as they can out of an in-person lecture, or is it similar? Or maybe they get more. I don't know.
That's a very good question. So that's a question that really troubled me since about 3 years ago. So what I
Hmm.
did since then is I keep track of students' attendance, both in class and also live streaming. So I can download a class roster for those who tune in during the time in which we live
Hmm.
stream the lecture. And then I pull out their test grades, I pull out their final exam grades in relation to student who didn't engage during class time, whether it's in person or whether that's live streaming, doesn't matter. And you know
Hmm.
what? I have not seen evidence that shows statistically significant difference between students' test
Interesting.
slash exam performance. Yeah, I have not seen that yet. So I think what
Very interesting.
that's very interesting because I thought, maybe, you have an inkling of feeling before you go to a research, chemistry education research project that I think this teaching intervention could have one way or another influence students' behavior. But this one
Right.
does surprise me. Yeah. But, I keep trying for the last 3 years, and so far I have not seen statistically significant difference. Um, so I think what that suggests to me is that regardless of how students choose to engage with the course materials, it's very much an individual learning preference, how they wish to learn, how they wish to study, right?
Hmm.
Just because student A choose to go in person and student B choose to watch live streaming and student C choose to watch the recorded in an asynchronous manner, as long as they're engaged in the material, the time and the how doesn't matter, right? As long as they can
That's
meet
a
those
really
learning
great
objectives.
point.
Yeah,
The time and the how doesn't matter as long as they're engaging with the material in a meaningful way.
that's right. Yeah.
And I can appreciate that because sometimes, if you had an early morning class and
Mhm.
you went there, but you weren't really there, or maybe you
Yes.
did go there and you're in the back and you're checking out some other digital media site,
Mm.
perhaps you're not even listening to the lecture as it's unfolding in front of you.
Hmm. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, so let's talk about teaching assistants.
Mhm.
You're working on an innovative new initiative. It's called a TA training camp, and you're using Crowdmark and you're using realistic simulations of student submissions. Can you tell us how that came about and what you're hoping your TA, I like to call it a boot camp, what your
Hmm.
TA boot camp is hoping to achieve?
Okay. How it came about is we have this unique course in our graduate program, Chemistry and Chemical Biology 700. So that would teach what we feel are essential skills for future chemists to have to increase their learning opportunities, future employabilities, all these great soft skills, if you will. So it
Hmm.
covered a wide variety of topics. And this year is the very first year that we have this unique opportunity to bring in teaching chemistry as one of the modules for this Chem Bio 700 course that we offer to our incoming graduate students. So that's how it came about. And then, in terms of what we're hoping to achieve, there's a few module learning outcomes we're hoping to achieve. Number one, we want to have an opportunity to really showcase to our students these are the learning opportunities that McMaster University, and sometimes specifically to Department of Chemistry and Chemical Biology, that we offer to support our teaching assistants, whether they are a tutorial leader, a laboratory tutorial, or a grading TA, right? And then
Hmm.
what are some common topics that could become a challenge potentially For example, how do you navigate student emailing you? What would be a proper way to address perhaps when the student's email come off a little bit more hostile than it needs to be? What would be a professional manner to address that? Because that's a very real scenario, right? And
Mm-hmm.
another scenario, maybe not as many people talk about, and that could very well occur in your journey, is conflict of interest, right? We're
Mm-hmm.
human. We cannot just say no to love. Sometimes things happen, right? But how do you do it in a responsible way? And by that I mean, if I become romantically involved or thinking of doing that, maybe with a student that's under my supervision, right? What would be the proper approach to do that? Bring it up to your instructor, right? Address that because there's something that we can do ahead of time. Maybe I'll just mitigate that situation by putting the TA in a different group, right? So they can minimize that perceived conflict of interest, right? So
Mm-hmm.
basically introduce them to various potential areas that we could see. Our TA may encounter that as a challenging situation. We address that ahead of time. And more importantly, we'll provide them with what are the proper channels to address them so that you don't feel lost when you feel that you're in a situation you don't know how to navigate. Who do I talk to about this? Is it at the instructor level? Is it at the associate chair level? Or is it at the chair level? Right? How do I navigate that? And then lastly, like when you are doing your job, for example, grading a lab report, grading a test, grading an exam, what is my expectation? What are the technology barriers that I need to overcome first, right? How do you navigate the learning management system? How do you navigate, for example, an online grading platform? What are all those that could be addressed ahead of time instead of, there you go, grade these 35 reports. Good luck. Right?
Right, right. Absolutely. I think you touched on some really interesting aspects, probably that most people don't even think about. But it seems to me, these would be really helpful life lessons. Underlining, communication is key. If you ever find yourself in a tricky position
Yeah.
at work, maybe in your future career, that communicating with someone who can help you or help you navigate that problem that you're facing is going to be here's some practice in how to go about doing that. Whereas, the tendency for most people is just I'll ignore it and hope that no one notices, and then in the end they end up I don't know, maybe on a jumbotron at a Coldplay concert, regretting their life's decisions.
Like I say this as if I'm an expert in this field, right? But the truth is, like everyone else, I'm just trying to get through my day to day life, right? There are
Right.
situations that I had to encounter in my day to day life where I feel like I'm being an ostrich, right? Avoiding the problem, right? But if there's anything my past mistake have taught me is really if there's an issue, address it. And if you can, address it as early as possible. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree with you 100% on that one. Getting back to this TA training more from a practical standpoint in terms of grading student work and giving feedback, why is it important to simulate a real grading scenario for your TA? And how do you think this practice will improve grading consistency and the quality of the feedback?
Okay. RTA, just like us, has very limited time, right? They wear multiple
Okay.
hats. They themselves are students first and foremost, and they're researcher as well in their research supervisor's laboratory, right? And on top of that, they hold a job as a teaching assistant. So the minimum, they wear three hats. And maybe there's other family obligation as well, right? So we want to
Mhm.
provide a very succinct and targeted training opportunities for them because we understand there's many, many things that could pull them away from dedicated towards their TA-ship as an example. So that's the number one reason that we address that there is a need to be able to provide training in a very succinct format. And why is it important for them to simulate with real student submissions? is because, again, to address that, just like they have limited time, so are instructors, right? I do not want to chase down a TA and say to this TA, I'm sorry, Lydia, your grading is just not to par. Could you please regrade all 35 reports? It's a waste of
Oof.
time. For me, it's a very difficult situation for everyone to navigate through, right? How do you have that conversation? When do you do it? And then more importantly, that just delay the targeted feedback that would be otherwise provided to our student, right? So it's a domino effect, right? So let's address it right up front. Provide the TA with the right tool, with the appropriate amount of training that's required before we ask them to perform the jobs that they are expected to perform. And just from over the years of teaching, for example, a particular course, right? You already know ahead of time, which topic area and what are some common misconceptions that students tend to struggle with, right? So we already know which are the problematic areas, which means we can engineer realistic student response. And then when the TA grade this during their TA training boot camp, right? It's a very realistic opportunity for them to provide what they feel is appropriate. And because we do address this ahead of time, it also gives us an opportunity to address to our TA. Now, I like what you said about this part, but maybe you want to consider adding this as a constructive feedback, right? Maybe put it in a sandwich type of format. Good, need to work on this. Great job at doing this. Yeah.
The
And
famous feedback sandwich.
that's right. That's right. I actually
So,
didn't know
this,
this until a fellow educator told me about this, that this is pretty unique to Canadian education scene, that we're very polite in how we provide feedback. Maybe in some other scenario, it will be just directly, this is what you need to work on. But we like to package
right,
it in a
wrong.
nice little sandwich. Yeah.
Yeah, we do try to. I was speaking with another instructor at our teaching stream professor at McMaster University in mathematics, and she mentioned, it's really important to support student mental health along with the teaching aspect of education these days, and that this is becoming an increasingly important element. So I think your approach where you're looking at how can we kindly but effectively give students feedback so that it can promote learning, it resonates with that aspect of taking care of the whole person and not just the material that you're trying to get them to learn.
Absolutely. I really resonate with that as well. And I like linking back to what you said previously. You notice that a common feature in this TA training bootcamp is not just providing with the skills specifically for TA, but that could be expanded further into a life skills about anchoring that foundation in communication.
Going to ask you, how long is the training boot camp, and like how many hours do they spend learning how to grade?
So because this teaching in chemistry, the TA training bootcamp is only one module out of many module in this ChemChem Bio 700. So we'll have two opportunities to do that and it's staggered throughout the very first week of September to the
Hmm.
very end of this course, which is just before Thanksgiving. So during this 1.5 month period, students will have, the graduate student taking this course will have an opportunity to receive feedback since September until October to really practice and hone their ability to provide effective feedback to students. So in terms of hours, the first session would take 3 hours and the last section would take 3 hours. But that's just the execution time for graduate student. How much time it takes for them to grade a simulated student and come to see us if they need help. We offer essentially free coffee chat sessions. We book a room and we have donuts and coffee. Please come us if you need any help while you're grading these student simulated tests or lab reports. Yeah.
Very interesting. That's good. So there's 2 3-hour sessions. there's student grading in between. And then by the end of this, your hope is that they're able to then proceed to grade real student work for midterms and finals
Yes, and any
and labs
assignments or
and
lab
labs.
reports. Yeah, yeah.
Right. Okay. How do you think grading practices, especially with tools like Crowdmark, can shape the way students learn or how instructors reflect on their teaching?
Mm. In terms of shaping how students learn, I think because we're able to facilitate providing targeted feedback in a timely fashion to student, that would have an increasing opportunity for students to address a previous misconception.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say they didn't understand this particular application. Because through Crowdmark, we're able to provide them with a targeted feedback in a timely manner, they can then apply the correct address to that particular application in the subsequent tests, subsequent assignments, or lab reports. So that's where I see the power of providing those timely feedback to students could shape their learning. And in terms of from an instructor's reflection of teaching, there is a particular area that I haven't talked about of why I really like Crowdmark is not just the training my graduate students on how to carry out their grading responsibility. Um, but on top of that, it also allowed me to allocate my TA hours in a more responsive manner. And by that, I mean, maybe I have a previous notion about how much hours I need to set aside for grading this. But because the platform also offer how much time each TA is grading a question, right? That really allowed me to fine tune my TA hours allocation in a responsible manner. Yeah.
So we have a feature in Crowdmark where it shows the evaluations per hour by each grader, and it
Mm.
shows the time spent grading by each grader for each assessment. Do you find yourself using that data to manage graders in the grading process? Like, is it
Mm.
similar to a real time reallocation of hours or giving one TA more time or one less? Like, do you see a lot of variability in each of the TA's approach to grading?
Mm. That's a great question. I guess it's more unique to my particular setting because when I assign TA to grade, they're all grading different questions within a test or different question within the lab reports. So TA 1 versus TA 5, I don't expect them to spend the same amount of time to grade their respective questions. So, how I find that feature useful for me personally is I could say, I need to pull away 3 TAs to grade test 1 or test 2 or final exam with me. I then look at how many hours those respective TAs have spent previously, and then I will pull the ones they haven't spent as much time. But I would do that in a way in consultation with the TAs though. And by that I mean just because the data show that Lydia spent 5 hours and Michelle spent 7 hours, it does not necessarily mean that Michelle is a slow worker, right?
Mm-hmm.
It does not mean that the quality of the work that she deliver is not as great as Lydia, right? So I think a number is a number and it work as a guideline, right? It
Okay.
work as a guidance, if you will. I think a more important aspect of that is to take that as a starting point and have a conversation, full transparency with your undergrad student or your graduate student alike to see, are you okay with this assignments? Are you okay with me
Mm-hmm.
pulling you to do X and Y and Z? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Again, coming back to that communication and reaching out and being proactive in training or helping your team to do their best work.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So it's hard to talk about anything in education today without talking about academic integrity and assessment quality and the way that educators are navigating the rise of AI and extra tools that students may or may not be using for their assessments. Do you think TAs can play a role in improving assessments or the assessment process in, these challenging times, if you will?
I think because TA has this unique position of uh, a liaison, if you will, between undergraduate student taking the course versus instructor. Graduate student is essentially that interface. And a lot of time, I do find my undergraduate student find my teaching assistant more approachable than me. They are more
Mm-hmm.
willing to discuss, to bring up attention to my TA than to me. So by the time they get to me, you know I'm their last resort. They are
Got
really,
it.
really stuck. So I absolutely see that our team, our army of TA, plays a very important role in training student using AI responsibly. So what does that look like then from a TA's perspective? So let's say a TA is grading lab reports and assignment, and you notice students is using a very unique equation to solve this question, an equation that we have never discussed in our lecture, an equation that has never surfaced in our textbook. And then not only that, they see that repeatedly appear in multiple student submission. So that's where I see TAs would then step in and bring it to the instructor's position. I notice students are doing this. What do you want to do about it? Right? To see that guidance from your instructor. Just bring that attention, bring that matter to the attention of the instructor and put the ball in their court. What do you want me to do with it? Instead of trying to figure out how do I navigate this. It's not their job, right? It's an instructor's position
Right.
to really outline what are the expectation of what does the TA need to do in that particular instance, right? I think a lot of times the instructor is probably going to take charge in that situation, in having a conversation first and foremost, right? With
Mm-hmm.
those undergraduate student who have this mysterious equation, right? Maybe they derive it, right? They just never show their work. I don't know, but let's find out more information. But unless my TA brought it to my attention, I'm not the one grading that particular question in the lab report. I would never know. But having that
Right.
conversation with your TA during this boot camp, right? Training boot camp on those
Mm-hmm.
channels of communication, I think that's where we can address about a lot of that beforehand. Yeah.
That's really great. I mean, I think that's really great advice, and something educators can consider is the fact that students will find teaching assistants or graduate students to be more approachable. They probably see them more in a more informal setting, maybe in
Mhm.
a lab or something, and it's less intimidating than talking to the professor. And I don't want to get in trouble, but I don't know what to do. I'm struggling.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really great point that you made there. Um, what advice would you offer to other educators or institutions considering ways to better prepare their teaching assistants or junior instructors with regards to grading?
Mm, I think being very mindful of how much time you're expecting your teaching assistant to go through certain training is very important. They're busy, so are we, right? But design a program so you address whatever learning outcome that you're trying to address in a targeted and succinct manner is very important.
Mm-hmm.
And because this is the very first time that we are doing a TA training boot camp, right? We will actively incorporate channels for our graduate student to provide us with anonymous feedback. What are some of the topic areas that you would like us to include? Maybe what are some of the suggestions, action items you would like us to incorporate this time around or in the future? No different than how we incorporate our, midterm course student learning experience survey that some instructors
Mm-hmm.
like to do. Yeah.
Great advice. Great advice. Let's talk a little bit about Crowdmark. Can
Mhm.
you share a feature or an aspect of Crowdmark that's been especially useful for training or collaborative grading?
Absolutely. So I'll share two features. That's my personal favorite.
Okay,
The
sounds
first and
great.
foremost is I love the common library feature. That saved me time, that saved my TA time, because we all know there are some common misconceptions that students tend to make for this particular question. Why bother typing out the same feedback 10 times, right? So that's the
Right.
common library feature. And that can be shared among the grading community as well. So I really love that. A second feature that's my personal favorite is being able to clone an already graded um, page of question and then
Mhm.
modify that according to how I will grade it if I'm the TA. I find that very, very helpful for training my TAs. I feel a little rude if I didn't have that cloning feature to go in and just erase somebody's work and put something else on top of it. But that cloning feature allowed me to clone that assessment, show the TA, like, this is my suggestions. This is how I will grade it if I were you. What do you think? And the TA has the ability to toggle back and forth, right? Between this is how I grade Lydia's lab report, and this is how Michelle, right, the instructor, graded that lab report. Compare and contrast. Yeah.
Mhm. Great. I love hearing feedback like that. I love hearing how Crowdmark's features are actually used by our instructors and teaching teams. The comment library is definitely, a really critical part of Crowdmark, and we're working on some new feature development right now to make it even better and more effective. I'm really excited about that. So, as soon as that release goes out, you'll be one of the first people I get in touch with. Um, Also, I don't know if you're aware. Earlier this summer, we launched a what we're calling a Crowdmark expert certification course. And essentially, it's 4 assessments that have been created in Crowdmark. There are multiple choice assessments. And they go through all of the different features of Crowdmark and how they can be used in assessments in terms of setup, grading, feedback, etc. So I'd like to invite you and your TA bootcamp students to get Crowdmark certified. If they pass the assessment, the 4 assessments in Crowdmark, then they get an official certificate, and then they can put that on their resume or put that on the wall when they're grading or teaching online.
Yes, I heard about this and I'm very excited. In fact, I already registered for that.
Oh, you've registered. Oh,
I
that's excellent.
I'm very curious, right, to see what these 4 assessment entail. So, yeah, I will put myself as a student go through that process to see what are maybe there's features that I didn't even know about, right? I think there's a great potential for our future teaching assistants to get Crowmark certified. But I would like to put myself through that first so I can get a more
Okay, fair
realistic
enough.
view, right? How much time will this require? So I could suggest to them, no, if you have this amount of time block in your day, please consider doing X, Y, Z. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. You want to know what they're getting into. The
Yeah,
good news is
absolutely.
all the answers can be found in our help documentation. So it's a very doable thing. It's not 100% easy. I'm not saying anyone can breeze through it, but it is something that we think will be valuable for TAs and instructors alike. So before we sign off, I'm just wondering if there's anything, about Crowdmark or any advice that you'd like to put out into our community of educators around grading and assessment in 2025 and into the future that you'd like to share with everyone.
Uh, Maybe not so specifically to grading, but to a broader perspective, to really resonate with one of our mathematical colleagues in our department of chemistry. I have a good idea who you're referring to actually, because we have constant conversation, right, about our
Okay.
overlapping student population. This awareness of student mental wellness. I think I would like to bring
Hmm.
that up again. I do feel that this is the topic, at least, right? We have a channel of more openly talk about it than we ever had in the past. So I don't know if that was why we hear more and more of student requiring accommodation, student that would like to have that channels in order to provide support outside of an academic mean. But I do
Mhm.
see an increasing trend of more and more students who appear right to really welcome this idea of having that support network that's already in place, or maybe support network that's about to come in place. But maybe something to think about for educators is, um, if you compare the level of stress that our current student population face as compared to when we were student, I do see more and more students need to hold a full-time job, if not a part-time
Mhm.
job, while they are like a full-time students, right? So maybe keep that in mind when we are designing our curriculum, when we're designing certain assessment piece. Offer multiple mechanism in which student can demonstrate that particular learning objectives that you're trying to achieve is going to be very appreciated by our student body. Yeah.
That's excellent. I'm really glad you brought that up, and I couldn't agree more. If I recall, when I was in university, it was the burden was really on the student to find a way to learn, and the instructor gave information, but it kind of ended there. And I agree with you that today students have a lot on their plate. They're constantly interrupted. They have a lot of responsibility, and it's great to hear that there are educators like you and others at McMaster University and other universities that we work with who are taking a holistic view and looking at the end goal. The end goal here is that students learn and improve and graduate ready to have a career in whichever direction they choose. And as educators, we need to support them in all aspects of that learning journey. And it's not always just about content. It's not always just about assessment. What do you know? But it's also about how do you even learn to learn, which is a really important life skill that we all need to take with us into not just at university, but into the workplace. How do I learn this new task or this new responsibility that I'm being given? So I really appreciate your perspective on that, as well as your perspective on training teaching assistants. And I always appreciate the plug for Crowdmark. So thank you for that as well. And we wish you all the best with this upcoming training camp.
Thank you very much. Thank you again for having me.